All right, Nightmare Success in and out listeners, we are back, and I have got a good one today. Um, we talk about what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt? How do you survive? How do you overcome? How do you set yourself free? Well, this guy has an unbelievable story, and I ran across his name's Harley Blakeman, and I ran across his story back when I was working on my book and thinking about speaking. Back in my mind podcast, and he did a TEDX talk, and I ran across, man, his story goes from a tough childhood to homeless to prison to getting himself out of that, going to a community college, getting good grades, and getting to Ohio State, making great grades, graduating the top of his class, and then he can't get a job, cannot get a job because of his background. And what do you do when you hit a wall like that? He just created a company that it's called Honest Jobs, and it helps people with a criminal record find meaningful work, helps businesses access a population of highly motivated and overlooked employees. Honest Job is the nation's largest fair chance employment platform. It's just everything that I hope that happens in the second chance world of getting people out so that we can stop the recidivism rate of close to 75%. And it's these type of people who are making a difference. So before we get started here, I want to recognize our sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. And this is one of those things, Harley, you probably don't like this either. Who likes spending a couple of weekends walking lots looking for a car? Then you spend like 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy the car. It's kind of like a trip to the dentist. Well, there's a better way to take away all this pain and hassle of getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and then they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate the best price. They'll deliver that car to you in whatever state you're in. They also can take care of you with the warranties and financing. Full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge. The new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them that Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Okay, folks, let's get into this. Harley, welcome in.
Thank you, Brent. Excited to be here, and great job with the intro.
Well, you got quite a story. I mean, we've kind of gone back and forth on trying to get together, but I thought I'm not giving up on this guy. This is an interview I want. But man, your story, Harley, is like one that you click onto the streaming services and you look for like inspiring, overcoming, getting to the other side, and it should say like Harley Blakeman. Unbelievable. So Harley, I think if I remember right, you're from Ohio?
I grew up in Florida, near Gainesville, Florida, but I've been living in Ohio since 2012. So
okay. Well, the reason why I thought Ohio was because of the Ohio State connection. So I thought maybe you were from the state there.
Yeah, I have family from Ohio, but I grew up in Florida.
So you're a Florida kid. Yeah. The nice weather. Yeah. Well, take us back a little bit, Harley, into your world growing up as a kid, because I know that there's a lot there. Can you help us unpack some of what was happening to you as a kid growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I was a goofy kid. So like I see pictures of myself. I don't have a lot of pictures. So when you grow up, I guess the way I grew up, there's just not a lot of records of my childhood. Like I have like 4 or 5 pictures total of me as a kid.
That's crazy.
Like no photos of my childhood, which is sad. Luckily my grandma has photos of like my father and stuff. So I have more pictures of him. But anyways, the pictures of me as a child, I'm like cowboy boots, a diaper, and a mullet because I was born in Texas. I lived in Texas till I was 3, then Arkansas until I was 5, and then Florida. And
Florida cowboy.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just a goofy kid, like bright blonde hair, super straight, bright blonde hair. And my parents were kind of the black sheep of their family. Like my dad didn't talk to his family much. My mom didn't really talk to her family much. So it was really just my mom, my dad, my older brother, and myself. And um, we grew up in a place called Keystone Heights, Florida, which is about probably 25 minutes maybe outside of Gainesville, Florida, which even
Mhm.
Gainesville, Florida is a small town. There's like nothing there but the University of Florida. So really the closest city was Jacksonville, Florida. And everything north of Orlando is not what you think of when you think of Florida. Like when you think of Florida, you're thinking of like Miami Beach and Orlando. Well, everything north of Orlando is just kind of uh, woods and trailer park and prescription pills and people scrapping metal, and everyone
Uh-huh.
goes to jail. Nobody goes to college. So anyways, I grew up in this trailer park, uh, fairly poor. I mean, my dad graduated high school but didn't graduate college. My mom dropped out of high school, and they both worked at this steel manufacturing plant. My mom was a receptionist, and my dad um, started like just welding. He was just like a welder.
Okay.
So as you can imagine, very blue collar, low education, and household was pretty good though. My dad really loved music, so I grew up playing music. We had a drum set, we had guitars and a bass guitar, and I kind of learned how to play all the instruments a little bit. And I love to skateboard and surf, and my dad would take me to the skate park like every other weekend. We'd go to the beach and go surfing. Uh, you know, but we just didn't really have money. Like we didn't have
Was your
anything
dad in
fancy.
a band, Harley? Was that,
When I
or
was a
was it
kid,
just a hobby?
he was, yeah, in
Yeah,
Texas. When I was young, he was big time in like a bunch of different bands, but in
yeah,
Florida, it was just like me and him. So he would
yeah.
play guitar, I'd play drums, and yeah, I don't have him anymore,
Cool.
but I had an 8-track where I would record, myself playing drums, then myself playing bass. My dad would play guitar, and we'd piece together songs. So these are like the best memories of my childhood.
And we
But
just missed like a whole generation of people there when you said 8-track.
yeah, I mean,
No,
I couldn't describe it to you what it is, but I remember that's
no.
what it was.
Yeah,
And later in life, I ended up buying myself like kind of what you have in front of you there, where I had like
yeah.
I had like Pro Tools and like the all that more modern
The
equipment.
fancy
But
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, back then that was kind of, before everything went south. Let's say I was 14, 15, and um things were pretty good. I mean, we were poor, but other than that,
Hmm.
I think things were good. And it was about 14 years old when my mother divorced my father, and it was completely unexpected for me and my brother,
Hmm.
um, and just completely shocked us. And we were felt like betrayed by our mom, because she just was like, "I'm leaving." She didn't really come to us and talk to us about it. And then when she left, she just kind of disappeared. She didn't like make an attempt to like see us every week or like anything like that. And it turns out she was like heavily addicted to drugs. And after divorcing my father, it became really apparent that she was not okay. She was suffering from, you know, extreme mental health crisis, drinking, drugs, and she even ended up in the hospital twice for mental
That had
health
to be tough,
issues.
Harley. When you were a kid, did you recognize that at all, or was it something that was just kind of kept behind closed doors that you didn't realize that she had issues like that?
Yeah, I, I I had no idea until she was like leaving.
Hmm.
So um
Were you
yeah,
close? I mean, was it like a close knit, mom son type
yeah,
relationship? Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I it's hard to like recollect stuff from when you're 13, 14 years old, and then
yeah,
like remember why didn't I know it was coming? But
yeah.
I think when you're 13, 14 years old, don't have any outside family. Like maybe an aunt or an uncle could have been like, "Hey, is everything okay at home?" It seems like something
Right.
no one did. So because I didn't really have that.
Hmm.
So yeah, when she left, it shocked me. And unfortunately, I think my dad wasn't quite emotion, I don't know the best word to use, but maybe emotionally intelligent enough or thoughtful enough to like protect me and my brother from it. So he, like, when my mom left, he like was like, talked bad about her and was like, I can't believe she did this. She doesn't care about you guys. Like, she
Mm,
must not, she must not care at all, blah, blah, blah. And the truth is, he wasn't wrong for that. I mean, he had been married to her for 20 years, and
yeah.
then she left him kind of with no explanation. But, looking at, as I've been an adult, I'm like, I would never tell my kids that, their mother
No.
is doesn't love them, or like doesn't want to be a part of their life, no matter what's going on, you protect them. So, um, yeah, I
Well,
think
you're
that,
so impressionable too at that age. I mean, you're talking about 13, 14 years old, and that's when you're just trying to figure things out. That's seventh and eighth grade, and sixth, seventh, eighth grade in your world, which that world is coming at you fast at those years.
yeah, yeah. So, when she left, it wasn't a whole lot longer. Um, I was just living with my dad and my brother. I was still in school, kind of suffering. My grades were suffering a little bit. And, at 15, unfortunately, like where I grew up, like it was common for 15-year-olds to like drink and smoke at like
Hmm.
parties. They get invited to the parties where the 17, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids are.
Yeah.
And it was just like funny to like get your younger brother to like try weed or drink or whatever. So I was already like exposed to, drugs and alcohol. And I don't even really mean drugs, just like weed and alcohol.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe about a year and a half after my mother left my father, my dad got in a motorcycle accident,
Mm.
which was really just the pivotal point for me, where I completely went off the rails, as well as my mom went off the rails even deeper, because it hurt her a lot too when my dad passed. And then my brother also went off the rails. So just like it all fell apart when my father passed. Yeah.
I just can't imagine because you were probably clinging to that with that you had your dad, you didn't have any other family around, your mom's gone. Wow. So what's going through your mind at that point, Harley? I mean, you're 15 years old, your dad's died in a car or a motorcycle accident. What happens in your world?
Yeah. I mean, first off, like I got called out of school and brought to the hospital to like see my father. And it's taken me a long time to like be okay with it, but for the longest time I was really troubled by like why they did that. Like they asked me
Hmm.
to go into the room and say goodbye to him, and he was in extremely bad shape. I mean, like
Mm.
it was scarred in my mind, like seeing my father the way he was, because it was a motorcycle accident and it was really, really bad. And at that point, they asked me to go in to like say goodbye to him. They knew he wasn't going to make it. They had already told me that he wasn't going to make it, and it's just really,
It's a lot.
yeah, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily regret doing it. It's been one of the things on my mind that's like, is it healthy to have that like last image be so bad? So,
Was he conscious at the time when you went in there?
no, no, he
No.
wasn't. No, they said he was, brain dead, and that he was on life support, but that they were, gonna pull the plug. Um,
Can't imagine.
Yeah, so, I'm not really thinking what's gonna happen in my life. I'm not like, "Oh, what am I gonna do?" I'm just,
Right.
devastated. So after that, my dad's family comes down from Ohio, like 2, 3 days later to prepare for the funeral, because he did have family in Ohio. I had only met them maybe 3 times. It was like for Christmas
Hmm.
every couple years, we'd go to Ohio.
Right.
And my mom shows up for the funeral as well. And at the funeral, my mom tells my dad's family that they don't need to worry about me, that she's going to take care of me, and that she's going to step up and do the right thing and all this stuff. And my dad's family just goes back to Ohio. And just over the course of the next month, it became really clear that she was not capable of stepping up or taking care of me. She didn't have her own place. She was staying with some guy that she had just met.
Mm.
And like she's like, "Oh, just come live with us." And I get there and they're like, "You're just gonna sleep on the couch for now." And there's like no food in the house. There's like beer cans everywhere. And like the house
Wow.
was super far away from school. So I didn't really have a way to get to school. So, anyways, I ended up basically leaving after like a week, because I was like, this isn't, I'm enough of an adult to know that like this isn't going to be good for me, and like I don't want to be here. So I ended up leaving, and in my story I talk about being homeless. That was my home, was to go live with my mom at some guy's that I didn't know, and she was bouncing around from guy to guy and like living in these extremely volatile drugs and alcohol environments. So I just chose not to do that, and I chose to go stay with friends on friends' couches, and that wasn't really sustainable either. But that's what I ended up doing, was kind of living on one couch for 2 or 3 weeks. Then I'd move to another person's house and stay there for a week or two, and move around. And it wasn't that uncommon for me to kind of be stuck without a place to stay for a night or two, sleeping in a car or wherever I could.
What'd you do for money? Did you have any money at all that you could bounce around? And I mean, that's one thing to bounce around from house to house, from friend to friend, but if you don't have any dollars that you're walking with, I'm sure that becomes even more
Yeah.
stressful.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So after my dad passed, I just really started hanging out. I dropped out of high school shortly
Mm.
after, like, I don't know, maybe a month after. I just stopped going because I didn't have clean clothes. I didn't have a consistent place to sleep. Um,
Has your brother gone also? Are you guys
my
not
brother,
connected at that moment?
yeah, my brother still lived in the same town, so I'd see my brother, but my brother was working full time, like bagging groceries at a grocery store. So there's no good jobs in this town. There's absolutely
Yeah.
no good jobs. Like everyone works at the gas station, or the best job in the town is working for the local electric company.
Mm,
Like that's the best job in the town. So my
right.
brother's working, but also my brother is getting pretty severely addicted to drugs. I don't know at this point in my story if he was on heroin yet, but by the time I got arrested, he was full blown addicted to heroin, and he was homeless as well.
Mm.
And I never got addicted to heroin. I never tried heroin. But at 16, when I dropped out of high school, I was selling weed consistently, and pretty much I'd sell anything that I could get my hands on, that where I knew someone who, like, I knew people wanted to buy these, and if I could get them cheap, I would buy them and resell them. I mean, that was pretty much the name of the game for me, was if
Yeah,
I knew where I could buy anything with the amount of money I had that I could turn around and sell for more, I did it. So
that's what you did.
wasn't really consistently one drug. It was
Just
pretty
whatever.
pretty consistently prescription pills.
Okay.
So I sold weed, but when I started um, selling prescription pills is when I started making real money. And that's also when I started getting really addicted to drugs, because I was self-medicating while I was selling. So
Hmm.
Xanax, there's these things called roxycodone. So it's like Oxycontin basically, but they're blue. And in Florida at the time, they were everywhere, and people were heavily addicted to them, opioids.
Hmm.
And I actually had a registered nurse that knew my brother really well. And she would like tell me, come over if you want and hang out. And she would like give me food. She'd like cook a meal. And she was a registered nurse, but then she'd also be like, are you doing okay? She'd like check in on me. And I'd be like, yeah. And she'd be like, do you have money? Blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, I have like $100, but it's not enough to get like enough weed to like make money. And she'd be
Right.
like, oh, well, here, do you know anybody that wants Roxy's? And I'd be like, yeah, I know a bunch of people who do those. And she'd just be like, well, here's 50 of them. Just like pay me back when you get the money.
Wow.
So that's how it all started, was I was, a vulnerable 16-year-old that was addicted to drugs, homeless. And this woman knew I skateboarded around town, and I was just moving from place to place all the time.
Hmm.
So basically my routine became coming to her house once or twice a week, giving her some money and getting basically a front. She would front me stuff. And that went on for quite a while, as I got like severely addicted. And I'll pause here for a second, but I eventually took a trip to Savannah, Georgia, and that's whenever I really got into selling like a lot. When I met some people in Georgia, and this person in Florida basically was willing to front me, hundreds at a time, several hundred at a time. And that's ultimately what I got arrested for, was getting caught with a couple hundred pills in Georgia.
So Harley, when that all was going on, I mean, I'm sure you were like in a survival mode. You're getting addicted. Um, were you hanging around other people? I mean, were there other, did you have a group of people that you were with? Because usually, you know, at that age, you're in school, and so you weren't in school. So were you with people that were out of school and you hung out with them? Like,
Yeah.
how was your life? How were you living your life?
Yeah. So I had this like split where part of the time, basically during school hours, I'd hang
Yeah,
out with these like people that were in their 20s, late 20s, sometimes
older
30s,
than you.
sometimes 40s. I mean, I was sometimes going into places where it was like a house full of people all in their 40s doing drugs.
Wow.
And I was
And you're
16,
like
17.
16, 17 years old. Yeah,
Yeah. And then, but when school got out, I would grab my skateboard and I'd skate down to the school and meet up with a couple of my friends that I knew from like a year prior that I went to school
yeah.
with. And by the time they're 16, they're skaters. They're in a small town. They all smoke weed and hang out and stuff.
Hmm.
But now I realize like I was the kid that all of their parents were worried about. They were like,
Sure.
but they also knew that my father had passed away and they knew my situation. So they were
Yeah,
sympathetic
felt bad for you.
and they would help me occasionally. But at the same time, I think they were like concerned about like me rubbing off on their own kids. So, I mean, over time, some of my high school friends basically just like stopped hanging out with me, or I stopped hanging
Hmm.
out with them because I thought they didn't, they were too boring and they thought I was, a criminal, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I more and more started hanging out with these people that were way older than me that basically I looked up to because they were providing for me.
sure.
These adults were like, come over. And they were my only role models were these adults who,
Almost be like your family, since you didn't have really anybody like that. That was kind of like your family of people.
yeah. And a couple of them would literally be like, here, to me as like a homeless, poor 16-year-old, they'd be like, well, here's a quarter of weed for free.
Yeah.
Just sell it and get some money for yourself. And to me, I'm like, oh my God, they care so
What a
much about.
nice person. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're selling pounds and pounds of weed and you're an adult and you feel bad for this kid, like it's not that big of a deal to them. But to me,
Right.
it was like, oh, in my mind, I'm like, this is someone I can look up to. This is someone I can depend on. And that was pretty much the narrative for the next, 2 years between this woman who was a nurse who was giving
And
me
then the
pills
people that you met in Atlanta,
in Savannah. But yeah,
in
and then
Savannah.
yeah, and when I met the people in Savannah, I realized that the pills that I was getting in Florida sold for like 3 times more in Savannah. And that's really where they were like, hey, if you can bring more, come back. And
Hmm.
just 2 or 3 times I did it, it got to the point where I was bringing like 500-600 at a time. And I was starting to make, a lot of money. So I wasn't homeless anymore. I got a car, I got an apartment, I got all this
So
nice
you were
stuff.
making money, right? All of a sudden you're not homeless.
Yeah, but I had nothing to live for. So I was just blowing all the money on drugs and partying and God knows what, because I didn't really have like a reason to save or like settle down or
Right.
plan for anything. I didn't know
Living
what.
for the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
looking back, I'm like, I don't even know what I have no idea what my plan was.
Well, I mean, it's amazing that you survived, really. Let's take a break right here because I want to get into when we pop back in, how this happened. Your nightmare happened when it all came down on you and you had to start walking through the possibilities that you're going to go to prison. Our sponsor, Do You Have a Crisis? I could have used this guy, Aaron, when I was going through my stuff. Aaron Duncan.net is a full service global communications agency. And he's a public relations. He does it's called aaronduncan.net. His job is to make bad news go away. They're known as the trauma surgeons of brand crises, corporate scandals, high profile litigation, legal investigations and prosecutions. To be in the public eye in the 21st century to experience a crisis. It's no longer a question of whether a crisis will strike. It's a question of whether you will be prepared when it does. So Aaron helps you with crisis management, crisis communication, media relations, reputation management, positive public relations, prison consulting, and coaching. For a confidential consultation regarding crisis or reputation management, email Aaron W. Duncan at gmail.com, or text or phone 636-236-5071, aaronduncan.net. He's the crisis management guy for everybody who's got a crisis. Talking about crises, Harley, so you start making money, now you have a place to live, you got a car. Did you know that you were getting into kind of a squeeze of getting hot? Did you think people were investigating around you, or how did it come down on you?
So again, like in my adult life, I've tried to like reconcile and understand myself back then, and it's really difficult because I'm such a professional now. Like, I've been trusted with millions of dollars. I manage
Yeah,
payroll, I've got employees, I have government contracts that I'm working
CEO of a
on.
national company, right?
And to think back to what I was doing back then, it's interesting to like it's not who I am now at all. So it's so hard for me to think about. But at the end of the day, I think what drove me to be who I was a complete um lack of self-worth and care. Like I just was like, no one will cry if I go to jail. I have no
Mhm.
one who's concerned about me. And I was listening, I was really into hip hop and rap, and you know, I would just listen to rap music, and I had 20-inch speakers in my trunk, and I just blare rap music and drive up and down I-95 selling
Yeah,
drugs. And I just thought, like, I'm like these guys. I'm making money.
yeah,
System
yeah,
wasn't for me. Like, I don't have, but I'm doing something great. Like, I'm making big dollars, more than most. I'm making more money than most of the people in my town, even though I'm not even an adult yet.
yeah.
I had no plans on what I was going to do with it, but in my mind, that was it. And I don't think I really spent too much time thinking about the consequences of being arrested. Like most people
Mhm.
committing crimes, I think, are aware that it's illegal, but they don't sit and think about the
What could
likelihood that they
happen?
would get arrested today and that what would happen if they did.
Right.
Your mentality is just day to day. Like, I'm just trying to get through this transaction.
Yeah,
Oftentimes criminals are like, oh, I'm just going to do this one thing and then I'm going to be done.
you're
Like,
done.
yeah.
So many guys say that they were out of it by the time that they finally got hit. They did do that one thing, but the one thing is the one thing that got them into the prison
Yeah.
sentence.
Yeah. And so I didn't see it coming at all. I had
Yeah.
no idea that it was coming. I was pretty oblivious to it. In fact, I was getting more and more reckless, and to the point you said earlier is like, I'm very lucky I didn't die because I wasn't only just selling drugs. Before I got arrested, a friend of mine said we need to go to Atlanta. Atlanta, you can get weed super cheap. We can get like lots of it dirt cheap. Well, I drove up to Atlanta and I got robbed. I got robbed. So some people in Atlanta just took all my money, and
Man.
so that happened. And then when I was in Savannah, I would get blacked out high on Xanax and Oxycontin. And a couple times I have no idea why, but I broke into cars. I had like a
Hmm.
Slim Jim, and I was just like going through cars. I never even got anything from a car, like nothing of value. I think I broke into 3 or 4 cars, like looking for stuff, but I didn't need money.
Yeah.
I you know, I don't even know what I was thinking. I think I was just bored, trying to be something. Uh,
Hmm.
and I'm lucky because back then Savannah was like the armed robbery, capital of the country one of those years when I was there. And it's not a great city. Like, there's a lot of shootings and all types of stuff. So, I could have easily taken a bullet while breaking into someone's car for no reason at all. I didn't even have a reason
Yeah.
to, like, at
Just be
that point.
gone. You didn't even need to do it. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, but yep. When I got caught, the guy that I was working with in Savannah just had this kid that he sold weed to, and the kid was, 17. When I got caught, I had just turned 18, and this
Hmm.
maybe 16 or 17-year-old kid that was selling weed sold to an undercover cop. And, I don't know the truth. It's been 11 years. I kind of blocked out of my brain, but that kid claims that he didn't snitch, that his mom snitched.
Sure.
But whatever, somebody told the police, oh, well, arrest Harley. He comes to Savannah every week with a trunk full of drugs. And basically either him or his mom, or him and his mom, who knows, basically like worked with the Chatham County Narcotics Department to arrest me whenever I was coming up the next time. So I was just sitting at a red light on Abercorn Street in Savannah, Georgia, when I was surrounded and arrested.
What in the world did you think? Because it had to be an adrenaline surprise of, oh my gosh, I know what I'm doing, but I didn't think anybody on that side thought they knew what I was doing. What, like, was it just immediate, I'm caught? What did you know the bigness of the situation? Like, how'd you deal with that moment?
Yeah, well, what's really weird is I'm going to try to not spend a lot of time talking about it, but let me take a step back because I was surrounded at a red light. But what actually
Yeah,
happened was someone knocked on the apartment I had in Savannah. Someone knocked on the door at like 5 a.m.
yeah,
and it was this kid's mom. And I did not know that he had been arrested yet. But she just woke me up and was like, the cops are at my house. They just arrested my son. You need to get out of your apartment. They're going to come here next. I heard them on the radio. They said your name. And I
wow.
was like, oh crap. I slammed the door in her face. I told my roommate, we got to get everything and get out. And we put everything in my trunk and I hit the road. Well, when I was, it's still dark outside. I'm like hauling ass down the road and I see that his mom is behind me and she's following me every turn and she's on the phone, and it kind of hit me.
Yeah,
I think she might be following me. So I start doing really weird stuff. I do a U-turn, she's following me. And ultimately I floor it. I'm going like 90. I'm going through neighborhoods in Savannah going like 90. And I eventually lose her and I come out on the main Abercorn Street and I turn right and I'm sitting at a red light on Abercorn Street. I'm sitting there waiting, time's going slow, super slow. I'm like tapping, like waiting for it to turn green. And that's when just
you're
like 3 or 4
surrounded.
cops surround me. So she actually worked with the police to get me to come out of my apartment with the stuff because
Yeah,
yeah. So like, I don't know, maybe I woke up and found out he got arrested. I would have like hit everything or left town or whatever. But so that's what happened. And when they surrounded me, so I already knew my adrenaline was racing because I'm
already,
running from this woman. And I have a
sure.
suspicion that she's like setting me up. But yeah, once the cops surrounded me, I mean, yeah, explosion of energy. My heart's racing so much because I'm like, okay, I'm not running.
Yeah,
I'm not going to run. I mean, there's like 6 cop cars here. I'm not going to run from them. So I just stop and, they tell me put your hands out the window or whatever. And they literally like pull me out of the car, put me on the ground. And I just remember them taking me to a cop car and they shut me in the back door for like 20 minutes. They didn't say anything to me. Then they came up to me and said, Mr. Blakeman, can we search the vehicle? And I was like, no, because it's not even my vehicle. Because before I had turned 18, it was actually my mom's name. Even though my mom and I never saw each other, the car was in her name.
yeah.
I said, it's not my car, it's my mom's car. And they were like, you need to just let us search it. And I was like, no, you can't. You can't search it until I talk to her. And then they shut the door and they went and searched the car anyways. They just like opened the trunk, pulled everything out. And as soon as they pulled out the backpack and they opened it, I knew what was in the backpack. As soon as I saw
Sure.
them step out, I literally just laid down in the back of the cop car and went to sleep.
Wow. Because your
Because
adrenaline probably just crashed.
yeah, and I think looking back, part of me is just like a peace came over me. This like
Yeah,
peace of um, like it's like I've been trying to control myself for 2 years, 3 years as a kid with no like guidance or
yeah.
anything. And like now I can just let go, like I'm in their control. I can't control what happens from here. It was kind of peaceful
That's
actually.
interesting. That's
Yeah.
interesting. You were in their hands. So what are the next steps that happened? Did you get a public defender, attorney? How long did this process take before you were walking into the gates of somewhere?
It was a long time actually. It was almost, I think it was 11 months before I actually
It's
got
a
sent.
long time.
Yeah, because I got out on bail. So I went to jail
Yeah.
and I called this girl that I was like kind of dating in Savannah. And she came and bailed me out. And it's funny is she was like, I need the money back. It was my mom's money. I took it without permission. And I told her, I was like, I don't have any money. They took all my money. They took my car. They took
Yeah.
everything. And then she was basically like, stop talking to me. She was like, after that, she's like,
You got
oh,
bailed out. She couldn't pay her back, and that was it.
yeah. She was
That
like,
relationship.
she was like, well, why don't you go down to Florida and get some more drugs and make the money? And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I
Yeah,
just got out. Like, I'm not doing that anymore. And then she basically
right.
never talked to me again. But I was out. I didn't have a car, didn't have money. Actually, my like partner in crime in Savannah, he actually let me move in. Like, he moved in with his mom, and his mom let me move in with his mom too, because I knew
Okay.
his mom pretty well. So I went back to living with him, but like I was super depressed. I knew I'm going to prison. I have no one to call, no one to help me. I don't know what to do. And I was still extremely addicted to drugs. So I was still abusing drugs heavily, even though I
Mhm.
wasn't selling them. I was
Self-medicating probably to try to get through all the stress of what you were going through.
yeah, and I still felt a lot of shame for the fact that people were having to basically like these people didn't want me living with them. They knew I didn't have anywhere to go. So
Right.
like twice while I was out on bail, I got arrested for shoplifting because
Oh my God, Harley.
I'd get blacked out on Xanax, and I went into a Walmart, just walked out with a grocery cart full of groceries, got arrested, woke up in jail, didn't even know why I was there. They had to explain it to me. And then another time I got arrested shoplifting polo pants from a Macy's because I thought I was going to sell them for $60 and then have some cash. And yeah,
This is why you're out on bail.
yeah.
Yeah,
So while I was out on bail, but they'll let you out on these like very petty,
sure.
petty shoplifting charges.
Yeah.
But then my friend's mom was like, "You got to leave. I'm sorry, but like it's not good for my
Mhm.
son. Like, can you, you really need to figure out a way to go back to Florida." So I went back to Florida and I was living on couches in Florida, and I was actually doing okay. I mean, I wasn't really committing any crime. I was just skin and bones, hungry, starving,
Yeah.
withdrawal. And cops knock on my friend's door and say, "Hey, we have a warrant for Harley Blakeman's arrest. Is he here?" And he's like, "Yeah, let me get him." And I walk up and I'm like, "What's going on?" And they say, "We have a warrant for your arrest for stealing a diamond ring."
Oh my God.
And I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, these two women in Florida wrote witness statements saying that you stole their mother's diamond ring." And I was like, "I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about." And they're like, "Look, we have a warrant, so you're going to go to jail. You can either come with us or, we can come in and get you." And I remember it was interesting. It was such a small town and they knew me so well. Like even the cops in the town knew my story. Like my dad had passed and all this stuff.
Yeah.
They ended up telling me I can meet them at the police station, I told them, I said, "Look, I'm out on bail already." And they said, "Yeah." And I ended up buying whites because it was like my fourth time going to jail. So I knew I got like white shirts and white underwear and all
Yeah.
this stuff. And I ended up turning myself in like 8 hours later and they let me do that. But then when I turned myself in, they explained these two people were claiming that I stole a diamond ring. They said that I came to their house and sold them drugs, and that when I was selling them drugs, I went into their parents' bedroom and took a diamond ring. So, anyways, I don't talk about this a whole lot because it's just a crazy long story.
It's
But
crazy nuts.
yeah, so uh, basically, this one woman who was a drug addict that I sold drugs to, she was arrested for stealing her mom's diamond ring. But after her arrest, her girlfriend, so she was with a woman, and that woman she was
Uh-huh.
with was a correctional officer, and both of them were drug addicts. Well, anyways, after she was arrested for stealing her mom's ring, together they wrote witness statements saying that it wasn't her, it was actually me.
Wow.
And I just wrote a letter to DeSantis 2 weeks ago asking for a pardon. So we'll see how that goes. But that, as of today, that's actually the only crime on my record. Was I was arrested for grand theft. Supposedly this ring was worth like $350. And because I was already out on bail, I couldn't get bail. So I'm sitting in jail in Florida for a grand theft charge. There's nothing I can do to get bail.
Mm,
And this is all before I even get sentenced for the drug charges.
that's
So
unbelievable.
yeah, so I was in jail for 3.5 months in Florida trying to fight this. And all I had was a public defender. And they basically were like, "Look, you've been arrested for shoplifting twice. You've got a pending theft drug
Hmm.
charge. And two people said they saw you do it. So if you want to beat this thing, you're going to have to like go to trial. And there's still a good chance that you're not going to win because, it's just pretty obvious to a jury that there's a high likelihood that you may have done this."
Hmm.
And he said, "Look, I'm going to go talk to the DA and do yada, 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 and try to get you a deal." And he came back and said, After 3.5 months, they said, we'll give you time served, no probation, no parole, no jail time. You leave today.
Wow.
And I'm going to ask that they keep it off your record. And there's a chance they might. You're so young. There's a chance they might. Well, I did what's called a no contest. I pled no contest, went in front of the judge, and the judge said, okay, we're going to give you time served. You can leave today, but I'm keeping it on your record. So I just did what I thought you were supposed to do. I took the advice of my attorney multiple times. He kept telling me to just take the deal, take the deal. I fought it for 3.5 months, and I eventually gave up because he basically was like, you could sit here for another year and still lose and actually have to do more time. So anyways.
And that's what usually happens. I mean, that what you just described is how people end up pleading to so many different things. Is just they want to get it through the system, get it over with, get it off their desk, and then that person has it on their record and they walk away, but it stays forever.
Yep. So whenever I left the courtroom, they brought me back into the jail, the pod where there's like 20, I don't know, 30, 40 people or something. And that night, I was told they were going to be letting me go. They came and called my name. They said, Blakeman, pack it up. And I'm packing it up. And I'm like, am I getting let go? And they're like, no, you're actually going to Interstate Compact. You're being transferred to Savannah, Georgia.
Wow.
So they didn't even let me go. They sent me to Savannah, and I had to sit in jail in Savannah until my court date to be sentenced in Georgia.
Wow, what an experience. So finally you get to the point of the original deal with the drugs. What's your sentence on that?
Yeah, so I know I did like 14 months and a couple days total.
Was state prison?
No,
state prison, not federal prison.
It was a state correctional facility, but it technically wasn't even a prison. It was a work camp. So I don't know.
Okay, I've heard about the work camps.
Yeah, I don't know the technicalities of this stuff. You know, it's for people who are doing over a year and a day. So similar to prison, but there's like more structure and they make you work and stuff. So, and I was very lucky to get sentenced to one of those facilities. I mean, the real hardened criminals tend to not stay there. I even saw multiple times where people would get in arguments or fights with the correctional officer and they would send them to the state penitentiary. They'd say, hey, this isn't maximum enough security. We need to get these guys out of here because they're causing trouble. So for the most part, there was, I imagine, less extreme violence, but there was fights almost every day. Gang violence like crazy. Bloods, cribs, vice lords, GDs. Like it was Savannah, Georgia. I mean, it was Georgia between Savannah and Atlanta. And like, if you weren't from Savannah, Atlanta, or Macon, you were either with people from one of those cities or you were with people from a gang. And I wasn't from any of the cities and I wasn't with any gang. And I was like,
so
white.
Harley, I'm fascinated to know, how did you do in that world? That's totally, you entered into this unknown world. How did you do walking into this? How did you survive it?
I mean, it was by far the scariest thing you can imagine. Barely I guess at that time I had just turned 19. It was like barely 19, 1 week after my 19th birthday. Are
you going through withdrawals or anything, or were you off?
Not at this point, because at that point I'd been in jail for 5 months, I had gotten in shape. I was pretty healthy, but I was still, even though physically I wasn't weak, I've never hurt anyone. Like I've never physically hurt anyone. So like to go into prison and never have been in like a real fight, I wasn't super confident that like, oh, if someone comes at me, I'm just going to like defend myself.
Right. It's not unfamiliar. Right.
Yeah. And, they just shaved my head. So I'm like fresh meat. Everybody can tell. And in this work camp, there's 8 dorms with a big central circle. You have to walk around the circle. And as we walk around the circle, they name off the people that are going in each of this, the 8 dorms. And as soon as we walk out, everyone's banging on the glass with cups and yelling and hooting and hollering and fresh meat and all this stuff. And, I was one of 3 or 4 white people in my 87-person dorm room. And as I'm like standing, they tell me to stand right here, that this is your dorm. People are hitting the glass, looking me in the eyes. And like, someone's like, that white boy's mine. That white boy's mine. And I'm just like, oh God, like it's over. Like this, I don't
Yeah,
know what I'm gonna do. I mean, just try to be tough, you know? That's all I can think is like keep your chin out, try to be tough, don't let them walk all over you. But I thought like I'm about to just get, beat up or whatever. And it turns out like as soon as they open the door and we walk in, there's like four of us walking in. No one comes up to me. Everyone's just hooting and hollering and stuff. I walk to it's an open bay dorm
hmm,
with triple story bunk beds.
wow,
And I walk to my bunk and I set my stuff down, and the guy above me just leans down and goes, "Hey man, what's your name?" My name's Rat. He went by the name Rat, like a snitch,
okay,
basically. And then he just said, "Don't worry about these guys, man. They're all talk. They don't really do anything. You're gonna be fine." And sure enough, he was right. I mean, for the most part, I was
big
able to,
sigh of relief.
yeah, and it took me a good week to feel comfortable. And then every once in a while, probably once a month, something would happen that would remind me that you can't get comfortable. Like this place is not
Exactly.
stable. It
You're
is
in
not secure.
prison.
So I'd
Yeah,
find myself being really comfortable. And every once in a while I'd get a reminder that some of these people are not
yeah,
kind
they can
people.
hurt you. Right.
Yeah.
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 So did you, and then I've heard a little bit of Harley about those prison camps or the prison work camps where, because I think if you're there, they can deduct time off and all those different things, but you can't get in trouble or they'll ship you and you do your full sentence. So um, was it really like what you think about, like you see in the movies, they wake you up at a certain time, you go, you do your work, and you're basically on this hardcore routine, and then if you
Yep.
do it, stay in line, then they'll let you go.
Yeah. So in Georgia, I was sentenced under what's called the First Offenders Act, which means if I
Hmm.
complete my sentence, they clear my record.
Okay.
Fortunately, the sentence was pretty extreme. It was, a year and a day
Yeah.
with another 9 years of probation. It was probation
Yeah.
technically.
Yeah.
And basically, yeah, they said, we're going to, instead of giving you 3 years in state prison, we're going to give you 1 year in this camp,
Yeah.
but you have to behave. So there's two things in Georgia they can do. They give you a split, which means they'll say you're to do 12 to 18 months, depending on
Okay.
your behavior. So when you show up day one, you've got a 12-month sentence, but every time you get in trouble, they can add
It
another
keeps
2
going
weeks
up.
or a month, up
Okay.
to a year and a half. And it's also at the sole discretion of the warden or whatever to just send you to a state penitentiary. If they're like, this
Mhm.
person's causing problems, I just want them gone. So there a couple cases where both of those happened. I had 2 weeks added to my split because I got caught getting a tattoo like an idiot, and I've tried to get
The
it removed
whole prison
since.
tattoo.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
tried to get it removed since then, but apparently like melted plastic doesn't come out of your arm very easily.
Right.
And then, I saw other people get sent away because they basically would like step in the warden's face and tell him like, I'm gangster, like you won't
Yeah.
touch me, I'll beat you, whatever. And then the warden would basically say, get him out of here.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we woke up every day and worked, and it was interesting because they made us, make our bed perfectly like the military. They made us
Military style. Yeah.
while they did count and everything. So yeah, I mean, we had to like march to Chow Hall basically. But these people were, I mean, like I said, gang violence almost every day. I mean,
Yeah.
just a lot of young guys, the average age where I was at was like 21 or 23,
Yeah.
maybe.
Young people.
Lots of,
Well, I'm curious, Harley, as you're going through this and you're working yourself into basically a new routine in your life, being in this environment, you start getting close to the door, knowing you're going to be free from this. What do you think you're walking out to? Like, what are you, do you have like a new plan, or what are you thinking is, okay, they're going to release me from here and I was living this world and dealing drugs. I can't do that. So what's going through your mind?
yeah, it's interesting is I never really had a grand plan. I never really had that much of a plan because in my mind, I was going home to nothing.
Right.
I didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Until a few months before my release, I was communicating with my aunts and my grandmother in Ohio, who are on my dad's
Okay.
side of the family, started writing me. And they started writing me. Then they started putting a little money on the phone so I could have a 15-minute phone call once a week.
Hmm.
Then they would even send me like $20 a month for commissary the last couple months I was there. And really, between our communications, our letters, they kind of acknowledge that they can tell my writing skills have gotten better and that I'm talking about stuff that's more looking forward rather than looking back. And,
Right.
they said, I think that you're young and you still have a chance to turn your life around. If you want, you can move to Columbus, Ohio when you get out. And you could
Okay.
actually stay in my basement for a month or two while you get on your feet. And it was hard for me because all I knew was like the people I grew up with in Florida.
Yeah.
At the same time, I had been reading books, I got my GED, and some of the people in the dorm room, and I've talked about this before, I think it's an important point that gets overlooked a lot, is that like older guys that were in the dorm with me encouraged me to move somewhere new, to get my
Yeah.
GED,
Different
to go to
environment.
college.
Yeah.
I mean, not everyone in prison's a terrible person that can't be changed. Many of them are good people who like
Exactly.
want to do well. There are some bad apples who like this isn't their last time going to prison because they
No.
haven't changed. But some of these people encouraged me. They said, you're young, you got so much you can do. Just
Yeah.
go. Just forget your
Yeah.
past and go.
Make
And
a
I,
clean
and I
break.
took that advice and I went to Columbus, Ohio, and I had
Gosh,
no.
just think, Harley, if you hadn't have done that. What a difference your life would have been probably. But it's something in you, and these old guys telling you, man, you're young, you can, and you just something instilled in you, just like I am gonna make a clean break. That's a big deal at your age, when you're at that age, that you're gonna go somewhere you've never been before, people you really don't know that well,
Yeah,
and a state you've probably not lived in, and you're gonna live in the basement of somebody's house. I mean, that's probably the thing that saved you, right?
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
I talk about it all the time with, sometimes I talk to like legislators and policymakers and stuff, and I talk about how there needs to be incentive programs to incentivize people coming home from prison to move multiple states away.
yeah,
Because I actually believe, as the lower you are on like the socioeconomic status, the more likely you are to be stuck in like a really bad situation. You know,
yeah,
wealthy and you go to prison, you come home, you can move. But
yeah.
like if you're in poverty, you're most
You're
likely
stuck,
going to have to go right back to the place you were living
right?
before with the exact same people. And I think that is a huge driver to recidivism as well, is just that the being
It
forced.
has to be, because
Yeah.
it's so much easier. Because the thing I think is so, and I mean, we're going to get on into all this because I think it's why what you're doing is so important. That recidivism thing is, if somebody doesn't, and you're a perfect example, if somebody doesn't have a place to go or a place to stay, then it's so much easier just to fall back into the people that they knew that were in the bad part, but it's the only thing that you know, and it's the only people that are going to take care of you. And that's why it's so easy that those people fall back into, then they catch another charge, and then they're back into the system, and then that's how
Yeah.
you get, 2/3
Or
and 3
they're
years, 3/4 and 5, and it's just crazy.
Yeah, and they've interviewed with 20 companies. They keep getting rejected. They've been unemployed for
Yeah,
6
it's
months,
hard.
and their old friend is saying, "Hey, man, just let me know.
Yeah,
I'll
why don't
front
you
you
just
a
do
half pound of
this?
weed. I'll just front you a half pound of weed anytime. Just let me know."
Yeah, it'll be
It,
easy.
yeah,
Why are you beating your head up against the wall, man? Nobody's gonna hire you. You're an ex-felon.
yeah. There was
Yeah.
plenty of that too. There's plenty of people in prison saying, "Good luck. You're never gonna get a good job now." So
Well, so Harley, let's get into this, because this is the stuff that people, it doesn't matter if you've gone to prison, everybody's trying to figure out, how do I was talking to a group the other day, and I said, I was giving a speech, and I said, we're at the point where at the turn of the year, everybody says, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone. I'm going to make a New Year's resolution. And we lose 25% of those people right off the first week. They just say,
yeah,
too hard. I'm sore from working out. I can't lose that much weight. Or by the end of the month, we've lost 46% of the people. Out of 330 million, there's 200 million people that make New Year's resolutions. By the end of the month, we've lost half of them. And mostly it's because it's easier to stay in your old routine than it is to step out into something that's new, makes you uncomfortable, makes you a little bit nervous, makes you possibly fear something. But if you can kind of start stepping into it, you start getting confidence. And I think from following your story, that's kind of what happened to you, is you started feeling different and you started getting different results. Can you kind of talk to us how this started happening for you?
yeah. I mean, uh, first off, I was living in that basement for a very short period of time. I was lucky enough, my aunt knew gentleman who owned a restaurant, and I was able to get a job washing dishes. She gave me a bicycle,
Yeah.
and I was off to the races. I rode a bike to work every day, but it was like a mile and a half away, so it wasn't too bad. But it wasn't Ohio, so sometimes I was riding a bike to the bus stop in the snow to get on the.
Yeah.
But really, I felt like for the first time I was sober, and I had like something to do. Like I didn't want to let my aunt down who had invested in me, and I
Yeah.
didn't want to let this guy down who gave me a job. And for the first time in like a very long time, I just had people to let down
Yes.
that
You
I
felt
didn't want to let.
accountable to. They're
Yeah,
helping
yeah,
you. You're accountable to them. Yeah.
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 And I just think that alone was like really important. But then as I was working, for the first time, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't doing drugs, I didn't have friends, I didn't really like. I had money,
Hmm.
and I was saving up money because I was living in an apartment that was $500 a month. I got a car on Craigslist for $1,000, and I was
Okay.
living really cheaply. And eventually I had like saved up like 5 grand in cash. And I would look
Yeah.
at it and I'd be like, it's amazing because I'm actually not spending it on drugs or alcohol or anything. And I started to really find a sense of pride in owning my own car and having my own stuff. And
Hmm.
um, a bunch of the workers at this restaurant were high school kids, like the servers and stuff. And many
Hmm.
of them were going to college. They had just graduated. And I was like, man, I wish I could go to college. I'd study business,
Hmm.
because the way they run this restaurant sucks. Like, I'd do better. And the kids were like, you can go to college. And I was like, no, I have a prison GED. Like, there's no way I'm going to get in. They're like, just go to community college.
Yeah.
One of them told me, here's the website, go to the website. And literally that night, I just filled out all the applications online and everything. And like, it was only like a month or two later, they let me know I got accepted for financial aid, student loans, and that I could
Awesome.
start the next semester.
Yeah.
And I was off to the races. There was a bunch of times where I didn't know, like, the student loan, they gave me a surplus check. And between that and my work, I thought I had enough, but then like I'd find myself short on cash and struggling. And I'd be like, okay, should I drop out of college to go
Hmm.
back to work, 60 hours a week? And, luckily there was a 2 or 3 times where my aunts helped me in a way that I had never had help in my life, where someone gave me $500 and just said,
Good.
oh, we want you
Yeah.
to finish college. Here's your rent for this month.
That's
Um,
awesome.
which, I'm privileged in that way, that I had family.
Yeah.
First time that, I didn't grow up in a household where college was ever talked about. No one talked about college. I would not have
Right.
gone to college if I had not moved to Ohio, because I
You
didn't know
weren't
much
around it. Right.
about it. So,
Your
um,
environment of people that nobody was going to college. Yeah.
yeah, but, I really did find a sense of pride in proving to the people I knew that I'm not just floating along. Like, I'm not here just to be here. Like, I still have,
Yeah.
I,
You can make
I
a
still
difference.
want, yeah, well, I want to make something for myself. And,
Hmm.
that resulted in me getting to Ohio State University as a transfer student and doing really well at Ohio State. And all along the way, I did extracurricular stuff. I was the treasurer of a student organization. I did that because I wanted to be able to talk about my grand theft charge. I
Yeah.
have a grand theft charge. People are going to ask me about it. If I'm the treasurer of a student org, I can say I managed all the money for multiple years,
Exactly.
trusted, and I did that. I got a Six
Harley,
Sigma.
how hard was it for you to get into Ohio State? Because I mean, I know that you did well in your community college, and then what was it? Was it difficult to get into Ohio State for you at that point in your life?
No, I mean,
No,
I just applied, and then they let me know I
you
got
got
in.
in.
I mean, it blew my mind. I
Yeah,
had no idea I was going to get in, because the kids that were servers and stuff at this restaurant were like really good kids that had like straight A's.
yeah,
And many of them applied to Ohio State and told me they didn't get in, that they were going to have to go to Ohio University or some other
yeah,
regional college. So when I got in, I was very, very surprised. And I believe the reason I got in was because I was kind of a non-traditional transfer student.
yeah.
Because, like, if you're applying as a high school student, you're bunched in with all the kids
Grouped in.
with
Hmm.
all the kids coming in, and it's extremely competitive. But as an adult transfer student, it's less competitive because there's
That's
not.
right. There's not as many of you. Yeah,
Yeah, so adults who are discouraged about college, like, you could actually you have a better chance of getting in as an adult transfer student with good grades than you would have if you had just done really well in high school and applied right out of high school.
It's interesting. Yeah. So you end up doing really well in Ohio State. And I'm sure at that point in your life, you're thinking, I'm on the right track. All I got to do is get out. I've done well at Ohio State, graduated top of my class, and I'm going to go out and take on the world. Just need somebody to hire me. And then what happens?
Yeah, I mean, my last 2 years of college, I was tinkering with entrepreneurial type things, but I still in my mind it wasn't that I was going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the things I've learned about myself is I have a lot of energy. Like I can do a lot. Like I can do a lot of stuff. It's to like a flaw where I don't give myself relaxation time. So like while I was getting A's in college, I was also writing a book and volunteering and doing student orgs and all this stuff. But really, I was doing all of this with the idea that I wanted to get a job at one of the big consulting firms or like Rolls Royce as like an operations manager because I studied operations. In my senior year, I just applied for all the jobs that I thought looked the best, a couple dozen jobs. And I was making it to like second and third round interviews. But once I disclosed that I had a record. So I was really experimenting with all these different interviews. Some of them I would wait until the background check. Some of them I'd tell them right
Tell them
away.
up front. Yeah.
And then really what I found works best, and in my book I talk about is for professional jobs. So if it's a restaurant, warehouse, manufacturing, you're probably only going to do one interview. But for professional jobs, they do multiple rounds of interviews usually. And what I found to work best was to wait until at least the second round interview.
To get to know you a little bit.
If someone more senior is involved, the more senior the person you're interviewing with, the more likely they are to have the conviction to go back to the team and say, hey, I want to hire this person.
Yeah, let's work on this guy. Let's bend the rules a little bit.
Yeah, a junior employee just doesn't feel comfortable and confident enough to go to bat for some random person who has a felony. So I got really lucky. Actually, don't talk about it too much, but I got 2 offers, and both of them were from a more senior employee in the company at like a third round interview. One was with a company called American Woodmark, a manufacturing company. And the other one was with Owens Corning, also manufacturing company. Just American Woodmark wanted me to go to Arizona. I was living in Ohio. Owens Corning, I could stay where I was. So I ended up taking that job. And I was a production coordinator for about 8 months before I was promoted to production supervisor, where I actually had quite a bit of responsibility. But yeah, I mean, there was 6 months of me applying for jobs before I got that. And I was just rejection, even though
you kind of became an expert. That's the thing that I think is so fascinating about your story, though, is that 6 months of doing that, being told no, you were actually using that experience to figure out how you get a job. You were actually figuring out what you just told me, your new system of, okay, I need a more senior person. I'm going to actually talk to them when I get to the second or the third round. Most people quit in that process, Harley, and you're learning the process as you go along, which is kind of incredible that you ended up creating a company that does the experiences that you went through. So you went into this world, you start creating, more responsibility for yourself. Were you thinking at that time that maybe I've got more to offer as a guy that could create?
Yeah, exactly. So while I was working this job, sometimes I'd work night shifts. So I was 4 weeks day shift, 4 weeks night shift. And night shift was slower. There was, pretty much we'd run like one product all night long. So if nothing went bad, I'd just be in my office for like 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours. So while I was in the office, I'd do like payroll and some paperwork, but then I'd have these big gaps. I was learning about Google AdWords. I got Facebook ad certified. I was learning how to create content on like a learning management system. And I ended up creating a thing called Comeback Collective, which was an online thing that you could pay $7 a month and you got access to the chat room. You got online courses. The courses taught you how to rebuild your credit, how to get into college, how to find a job, how to find an apartment. And it was all for people with records. And at one point I had about 35 people paying me $7 a month while I had my job. And the goal was just like, I want to share all the stuff I learned. Like I'm sure at this time I had bought my first house. I was very proud of like what I had accomplished. And to your point, like I was learning. I wasn't just like, oh, I did it. It was like I was documenting
Mhm.
what worked and what didn't work. And it's very much like an entrepreneur, right? Like I'm still trying to figure out how to do enterprise sales, and
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It's just like
Mhm.
interviewing. You got to figure out what works, who needs to be in the room, when to tell them, how to pitch
Right.
it,
Yeah.
what's the environment that needs to be right for this to work. But yeah, I was creating this online resource and making some money off of it. I didn't have an LLC or a company or anything, but eventually I checked what money would I get if I cashed out my 401k, and it was like
Yeah.
9 grand. And I was like, I'm doing it. I'm just going to quit. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to make this company work.
Took the jump.
And I quit. And about 3 months later, I was looking for a job again because I had only grown my audience from 30 to maybe 40 in 3 months.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
lot harder than I thought, but I ended up actually, two things happened. I got another job, but at the same time I got another job, I pivoted the business to just focused on employment, because I
Mhm.
surveyed those 40 people and I said, what are the issues you're having the most trouble with? And by far, finding a job was the one that people said.
Mhm.
So I kind of pivoted my company and called it Honest Jobs. And the idea was I'm just going to help companies hire people with records. I still hadn't really proven it yet, but I went to a manufacturing company, and this was one of my strengths, is like I have no fear to just like go talk to people and ask them, would you pay for that? And
Yeah.
then if they say yes, I go and I do it. And I say, okay. So I went to a manufacturing
The
company and
answer
they
is
said,
always no if you don't ask, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And this company said, yeah, we've hired people from prison before. If you send them to us and we hire them, we'll give you $500. And the next
Wow.
week they hired someone I sent them and I got $500. And as soon as that happened, I quit my job again. and And it wasn't long before I met a gentleman who invested $100,000 and helped me create like a real company out of it. And we're still good friends today. He's an amazing individual. And I guess the rest is history. Honest Jobs is growing. Honest Jobs now is a free platform that right now we have about 52,000 formerly incarcerated job seekers that use our service. And we work with about 1,300 companies helping them hire people with a record.
It's just such a needed service that I love it that you are the one that created it, Harley, because you have the seat at the table. You lived it, you walked through it, you know it. So uh, nobody can trick you into a conversation. You know what your company does. You know why it does it. You see these people get placed, which has to be such a. I mean, you talk about fueling somebody up. That's got to fuel you up to know that you are placing people in. There's so many people that have records. I think it's roughly like around 70 million people. There's 330 million people in the United States, and then you multiply that out of people that are around those people that get affected, families and wives and whatever. And I just, how long has Honest Jobs been in existence?
So I've been running this business for a little over 4 years, but we've been Honest Jobs officially for a little less than 4 years. So there's
Yeah,
about 6 months there where we were like in transition.
I just think that there's such an appetite for exactly what you're providing. And here's the other thing. A lot of companies don't know that they can benefit from hiring somebody that has been in the prison system. And it's just like a whole world that you're creating, because there's a lot of people out there. There's bad apples. So you take that off to the side. There's bad apples and everything. But for a lot of people, they're so enthused to actually have a real opportunity. And they're going to be a good person. They're going to be a person who's going to be dedicated because they're going to be so thankful to be given this job. It's a different kind of dedication.
Yeah, I was just writing an employer today that there's kind of like three things I always focus on, which is the size of the talent pool,
Yeah.
the loyalty,
Mm-hmm.
and then the diversity. So the size, like you said, 1 in 3 Americans have a record. You know, about 12% of the workforce has a felony. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of companies will still hire you if you have a misdemeanor, which people with misdemeanors still have a hard time. They get
Yeah.
rejected too. But when you have a felony, it's really life-changing. It can
Mhm.
stop you from not just a job, housing, college, tax benefits, all types of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a huge population. So if you're just telling people no because they have a record and that's it, like you're gonna drive up your wages. Like the
Yeah.
cost you have to pay an employee is going to go up inherently because there's less people. It's
Right.
just supply and demand. So and then um on top of that, formerly incarcerated people can't just leave because the person down the road is offering 50 cents more an hour. Like,
Exactly.
like
Right.
right now in this labor market, people are leaving your business because they can make 25 cents an hour more. And formerly
Right.
incarcerated people are sitting there thinking, I got rejected 100 times before I found this
I'm
job.
going to stay here.
I'm not
Right.
I'm not spending every night and evening looking for another job. I'm just thankful. So that's the size. And then, the loyalty. There's a lot of research out there that shows this population's more loyal. They stay longer for the reasons I just described. And then the
Mhm.
last one's diversity. Criminal justice system disproportionately impacts people of color. There's
Mhm.
a widely cited research from the Brennan Center that shows 1 in 3 Black men are projected to go to prison. 1 in 3 Black men will go to prison, is what it says. I don't like to say they will because hopefully things change. But the data shows 1 in 3 Black men will go to prison, 1 in 6 Latinos will go to prison, and 1 in 17 white men will go to prison. Right. So
Mhm.
there's a lot more white men than there are Black and brown in America. And that's, you and I have both been in prison. So we're,
Right.
we're part of that statistic. But when you go from 1 in 3 to 1 in 17,
Yeah.
over the last 3 years, every corporation, especially the Fortune, 1000, put
Mhm.
out big statements about their diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives and how they're putting money into hiring more people of color. You literally will not succeed if you're not able to hire someone with a record.
Looking at this pool. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
because people of color are significantly more impacted
Yep.
and they're just losing money and they're not going to get the outcome they want. When in reality is if they just reassess their background check policy, they can get the outcome they wanted without even having to dump millions of dollars into it. Just stop sending people away who are qualified because they have a record.
So Harley, if somebody wants to get a hold of Honest Jobs, they can just go to honestjobs.com, right? You
Yep.
go and then you start the process and try to fit yourself into that world.
Yep, completely free for job seekers. And we're growing. We have a lot of jobs. We're gonna have a lot more over the next month. We're adding a lot more jobs.
Mhm.
But it is typically more blue collar. And
Yeah.
this is partly we have over 1,300 companies. Companies are a lot less hesitant to give us white collar jobs, and that's because you know there's still a lot of stigma around people with records. Even when they are willing to hire people with records, they're typically reserve the higher paying jobs for like social capital, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
well, you got to know somebody, have a reference, whatever. But we
Yeah.
are getting more white collar jobs.
Well, and the other part of that is too, Harley, is you get your foot in the door, and kind of like what you did with yours, you got more and more responsibility where you were with that first job out of the chute, and it also gave you some more confidence to think, hey, wait a minute, maybe I could do this on my own, maybe I could be that person. But I always ask people this: all the stuff that you've gone through, Harley, you've lived like an incredible life, and here you are. What do you think's your biggest takeaway from all of it for people listening out there?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest takeaway from all of it is to like just embrace the bad stuff. Like if something bad happens to you, like um I have made Honest Jobs what it is by being extremely public and humanizing the things
Yeah,
that are controversial. So basically all the social platforms and stuff, you don't get any eyeballs talking about normal stuff and saying stuff that blends in. What really works is saying, I was a homeless teenager that went to prison when I was young, and here's a picture of my mugshot on LinkedIn. And literally
that'll do
telling
it.
that story got me invited to the White House. It has allowed me to raise $3 million to build my own businesses. So really
Mhm.
just being authentic in the worst of what you have to talk about because you're not alone. And I think when people see you publicly talking about something, it actually invites them to trust you more than if they find out about it later. So this isn't going to work for everybody. I don't encourage everyone to post their mugshots online, but I think um, oftentimes people can't help you if they don't know. And I think
Absolutely.
that was one of the things I learned was like the more people that knew I was trying to find a job, but that my record was stopping me, the more people would reach out to me and say, "Hey, we've hired people with a record before. I could probably help you." So
Yeah.
I think that's my biggest takeaway. I've learned a lot. There's so much to come for me and for my company, but like that's the thing that has rewarded me the most.
It's incredible advice, Harley, because being vulnerable, being authentic is those are the qualities that people glue themselves to, and it builds trust, and ultimately it will move you along in life if you can do that. I think that's excellent advice, unbelievable advice. Your book, or the name of your book?
It's called Grit, Grit, How to Get a Job and Build a Career with a Criminal Record. It's like $12 on Amazon.
Love it. Love it. And anybody else who wants another book, I've got one too. It's Nightmare Success, Loyalty, Betrayal, Life Behind Bars, Adapting, Finally Breaking Free. You can get that at Barnes and Noble, Amazon. And for everybody, we're doing really good with reviews on Apple. It's a really big deal to leave a review on Apple. It helps promote the show. And then follow the show too. It's just, you drop that thing down. If you're on your phone, there's 3 little lines up there. Just hit follow. Spotify, hit the bell. It's a big deal. Love it when you guys leave me a message on brettcassidy.com. We can talk back and forth. We do have, and just to remind everybody who's listening, I have 200 prisons behind the wall with the Dovo. This is a very good. I love this interview to go out and hear those guys to be able to hear that from behind the balls. I think there's 200,000 tablets that are being heard. Love that. For everybody, what I used to write back to my people when I was in Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Harley, thanks so much for being with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brett. Excited to have everyone hear it.
Incredible story. Nightmare Success in and out. Thanks, everybody.